given over 100 presentations in various regional, national, and international meetings. He is a winner of multiple awards, including Annual Research Award of American Society of Cataract and Refractive Surgery for on endothelial keratoplasty. He has been a recipient of Dr. Pradeep Swarup Award by All India Ophthalmological Society, Developing Nations Grant by Asia Pacific Academy of Ophthalmology, and Young Achievers Award by North Zone Ophthalmological Society. Dr. Prashar has served as a reviewer and as an editorial member for various international and national journals of repute. His research interests include ocular surface and adnexal inflammations, dry eyes, corneal transplantation, cataract, ocular pathology, and genetics. So with this, I request Dr. Prashar to take over the session and continue further. Thank you, sir. Sir, over to you.
Thank you so much, Gneshji. At the outset, I would like to extend my heartiest welcome to all the participants who have spared their valuable time to attend this online webinar. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, perfectly fine.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So today I'll be giving a general overview on corneal transplantation and the shifting paradigms. So starting right away. As we all know, corneal transplantation is one of the most successful of all organ transplants by virtue of cornea being an unique structure. It is avascular and it is in a state of immune privilege in the body. The concept of corneal transplantation is very old. It was first suggested by Erasmus Darwin, grandfather of Charles Darwin, in his book Zoomania, that was written in 1796. In 1838, Richard Kissam reported first corneal transplant in human from a pig cornea, but obviously it failed after a couple of weeks. Then various surgeons, they tried all sorts of xenograft from chimpanzee, from gazelle, from other animals, but none of them worked. And the first successful corneal transplant was done by Dr. Edward Zerm in 1905. And the field of corneal transplantation actually picked up after the first eye bank was established in United States in 1944. So just going back to basics, we all know cornea is a transparent avascular watch-like structure which forms anterior 1/6 of the outer fibrous coat of the eyeball. And I'm sure everybody here would know that the cornea is composed of 5 layers: epithelium, Bowman's layer, stroma, Descemet's main membrane, and endothelium. And recently, Dr. H.S. Dua has described another membrane just anterior to the Descemet's membrane, which is known as Dua's layer. And this is the histopathological slide. You have this corneal epithelium, Bowman's layer, stroma, Descemet's, and endothelium. And this is the diagrammatic representation. So cornea is basically a highly organized group of cells and proteins, and which has 3 basic functions. One is barrier and filtration of the ultraviolet light, and most important is cornea. We all know that cornea contributes more around 3/4 of the total refraction of the eye. And for it to function normally, the cornea has to be totally transparent. So nature has made it in such a way that there are no blood vessels, and it is nourished by tears, environmental oxygen, and from aqueous humor of the anterior chamber. So when you are healthy or in normal individuals, the cornea is clear. And loss of transparency due to any reason, any pathology, will lead to visual impairment because the light is no longer transmitted normally across the cornea. And till recently, the only available treatment for such pathologies was full thickness penetrating keratoplasty, and that was procedure of choice till since Edward Zerm started until 90s. So what do we do in full thickness penetrating keratoplasty? So initially a circular cut is made into the cornea which incorporates the pathology or the diseased part, and then this diseased part is removed. We use like circular blades which are known as trephines, and then a donor cornea is used and a graft is fashioned from the donor cornea, appropriately sized, and this is brought into the field and it is secured with ultra fine sutures into the host bed. These are few examples of penetrating keratoplasty. So this is a corneal OPST, PKP done for corneal OPST. This patient had cataract also. So he underwent a triple procedure. Penetrating keratoplasty done for spheroidal degeneration. For pseudophakic bullous keratopathy, quite advanced. Other indications include failed graft, where you have to redo it to visually rehabilitate. Then there are some therapeutic causes, like this young, beautiful girl who had a anterior staphyloma, and it was highly, disfiguring to her face. And we were able to kind of rehabilitate. Visual acuity did not improve much, but still there was, quite a significant improvement in her appearance. And sometimes you have to do it for therapeutic cases like impending perforation, and also for visual rehabilitation. And another therapeutic case with a perforated fungal corneal ulcer, and you do a therapeutic PKP to salvage the eye. And quite often in our part of world, where we have a lot of fungal infection because of farming community, Punjab is a agriculture state, and we get a lot of these injuries, vegetative matter injuries, especially from paddy fields. And quite often patients come when the ulcer is quite advanced. So this was nearly a, limbus to limbus involvement with the fungal corneal ulcer. These are KOH shows multiple filaments. And here we had to do a freehand dissection and limbus to limbus, like a large graft, and somehow we were able to salvage the eye. Sometimes, PKP is done for to restore the integrity of the eyeball, like in tectonic reasons, like in a perforated corneal ulcers. And we did a study here in Amritsar, and we found that unlike the developed countries or Western countries, where keratoconus and Fuchs dystrophy are the major causes indication for corneal transplant, most of our patients are visually debilitated due to corneal opacity or due to infectious keratitis. And just to show you what a PKP looks like, I'll try to. So this is 35-year-old male who had a blunt trauma 25 years back, underwent a cataract surgery elsewhere, and there was initially he saw a little bit, but there was gradual deterioration of vision. And when he presented to me, he had a dense corneal opacity with compensation and band keratopathy. So in such cases, so this is the pre-operative picture. You can see corneal decompensation and a lot of these deposits, spheroidal degeneration and calcium deposited in the periphery. So initially we scraped it off from the periphery with a crescent blade. And then for PKP, we use a, customized, trifines as per the size of the cornea. And you can use a freehand dissection, or sometimes you have like suction trifines. And then a stab incision is made. And then viscoelastic is injected into the anterior chamber. This patient, and then the diseased, host cornea is excised. And this patient had, I suspected it to be he had a 3-piece IOL in the anterior chamber. And when I went in and I saw that it was something unusual. And this was a very unusual kind of IOL. It had one optic and it had 3 haptics, something which I had never seen. So here the haptics are disengaged, and they were very firmly stuck up in the angle. And when I pulled, it was like I feared I might tear the iris root. So with this Leszczynski hook, I tried to give like a counter traction at the base of the angle so that I do not rip off the iris and cause iridodylisis. And slowly, all one by one, all these 3 haptics were disengaged. And this is the IOL which was explanted. And there was a little bit of capsular support, in the sulcus. So did a little bit of vitrectomy, and then somehow I could just implant a single piece PMMA into the sulcus. So then a 0.5 mm oversized donor cornea button is fashioned, and it is brought into the host bed. And then initially we make 4 cardinal sutures like at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, just to so that there is equal distribution of the tissue all around, and in an attempt to minimize the post-operative astigmatism. And this I will try to fast forward. So cardinal sutures are placed, and then in this case I used a single running suture all around, and then the suture is tightened and the knots are buried. And this is the post-operative picture, and this is the IOL, which is known as Dubrov IOL. Full thickness penetrating keratoplasty, and over the year we realized that PKP, full thickness, is associated with a lot of post-operative complications. These are some examples. It can lead to persistent. You may have a persistent epithelial defect, wound leak, inflammation, recurrence of infection in graft, or endophthalmitis. And then there are suture-related complications like suture-related infiltrate. And the sutures also induce a lot of neovascularization into the graft. And the minute neovascularization of graft is not a good sign. It is a precursor for immunological rejection. And then this is sometimes you have a wave of keratoprecipitates marching across the endothelium. It was first described by Iranian ophthalmologist Dr. Khudadost, and this line is known as Khudadost's line. So as it marches across the endothelium, this part is irreversibly decompensated, and it will develop a lot of edema. And sometimes you have like immune-related rejection of all the layers of the cornea, and then this is like a necrotic graft, and it cannot be salvaged. You have to do a repeat graft in an attempt to salvage the eye. So recently, over the last you can say 2 decades or so, there has been a lot of developments, especially in the field of cornea. It has undergone a sea change, and especially in the field of specialized keratoplasty techniques. And also there are a lot of advancements in stem cell transplantation, like a simple limbal epithelial transplant, which has been described by Dr. Virendra Sangwan. Newer immunosuppressive drugs, which have made transplantation transplant survival a little better. We have newer anti-glaucoma drugs, which are more cornea friendly, and there are also improvement in IOL designs and new IOLs which are friendly to the cornea. Now, most of my talk will be confined to lamellar surgery. So why to do lamellar surgery? Because it makes more sense and it's more logical that it's better to replace only selectively the diseased corneal layers rather than full thickness of the cornea, especially when in conditions where the pathology does not run through the full thickness and some of the layers are not involved. So it helps in better preservation of the structural integrity of the globe, associated with more rapid visual recovery, less endothelial rejection, especially in case of DALK, where you preserve the endothelium. And if you do endothelial keratoplasty, you preserve the anterior surface of the cornea. So this is the nomenclature. Lamellar keratoplasty we classify into anterior and posterior. Anterior can be classified into anterior lamellar, and when you try to dissect try to bare the Descemet's membrane or go very deep, close to the Descemet's membrane, this is known as deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty. And then the posterior lamellar keratoplasty has different variants. Earlier they started with the DLAC, deep lamellar endothelial keratoplasty, but it was technically very challenging. So eventually, the new techniques came in where you just do a descemetorrhexis and implant the endothelial graft. DSEC, Descemet stripping endothelial keratoplasty, where you make the graft with the manual dissection. If you use a microkeratome, then it is Descemet stripping automated endothelial keratoplasty. And recently, new technique has come in, which is known as DMEK, Descemet membrane endothelial keratoplasty. So there may be some pathologies in which the diseased cornea may be scarred or abnormally shaped, and the pathology or the disease does not involve the full thickness of the cornea, and it is confined only to the anterior layers. So here it would just like in example keratoconus or anterior stromal scars. So here the surgeon will remove only the anterior layers of the cornea while trying to preserve the Descemet's membrane and endothelium. And then in this defect created, he will make a graft appropriate size from which the Descemet's membrane has been removed, and this graft is brought into the place here. And again, it is held in place with ultrafine sutures. There are multiple techniques which have been described to do a DALK. Most popular among these techniques are big bubble or Unver technique and Melis manual dissection techniques. Other surgeons have also described various techniques like with the viscoelastic, hydrodissection, with the femtosecond laser and so on. So this is what a DALK would look like. This was done for keratoconus, and this is a DALK for macular stromal dystrophy, and for corneal degeneration, which is very common in our part of Punjab. And just to give you an example, a 16-year-old boy who presented to me with the hydrops in right eye had a keratoconus because of keratoconus, and had a keratoconus in left eye too. So initially we tried to manage this conservatively for right eye. We did a C3R in his left eye, and this is how he presented in right eye. So he had hydrops and a lot of inflammation and edema of the cornea. And eventually the edema resolved, but he had this dense scar. So it looks clear here, but he had lot of steepening, keratometry more than 80 diopters or so. So there was vision was fairly compromised, just finger counting. And initially what we do in DALK is this is the surgery. Initially you make like a scleral incision here, just like you do it for SACS. Then a side port incision is made inferotemporally. The air bubble is injected into the anterior chamber to make the eye form. And then we proceed with dissection from this tunnel here. And these are like specially designed dissectors, Morlet and Ogawa. There's no financial interest. And you try to dissect in the stroma as close to Descemet's membrane as possible all around. So on one hand, you have to dissect it, and while trying to make sure that you do not rupture or perforate the Descemet membrane. Otherwise, you will have to convert and do a full thickness penetrating keratoplasty. So I'm going all around, and the hydrops area, the area of scarring is approached towards the end. So gently, it requires a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of time to do the dissection in such cases. So you go all around and try to create a pocket deep in the stroma. Then this scleral tunnel is closed with sutures, and the anterior chamber is deflated. Most of the air bubble is removed. You leave just a small amount of air bubble in the center. Then viscoelastic is injected into the tunnel, and you can see the air bubble going into the periphery. It means the two lamellae are separating, and there is space in between the anterior lamella and posterior lamella. Then use the appropriate size define. Here I had to use a relatively large define because keratoconus was involving most of the cornea. And then the anterior corneal button is gently excised, and the air bubble here plays a very crucial role. Now you know that the integrity of the Descemet membrane is preserved as long as you see the air bubble there. So you go all around and try to excise the anterior corneal button, and in this area of the dissection, because if you pull it too hard, you might just rupture the scar tissue. So this area is approached in the end, and here there was a lot of scarring, so I had to use like a crescent blade to dissect it gently. And you can see the air bubble is still there, so means you are fine. You can go ahead and continue with the anterior lamellar keratoplasty procedure. So finally, the anterior corneal button is removed. And then I found that still there was some residual scar tissue here. So I was probably trying to be too aggressive to be or become more meticulous. And when I was attempting it, there was inadvertent perforation and leakage of aqueous from this perforation. So many times this rupture just extends and becomes too big. But here I was lucky; the air bubble stayed inside the anterior chamber. and the integrity is maintained. In such cases, sometimes it is possible and you can continue. So donor corneal button is prepared. You remove the Descemet's membrane and endothelium, and it is oversized only by 0.25, unlike regular PKP where we oversize by 0.5. And then this is secured to the host bed, and we try to compress it a little harder this time because thickness is more than the on the recipient side. And then in this case, same way, you use cardinal sutures, and then different like a turning suture was used, and the knots were buried. So this is the how it looked at the end of the. This is the appearance in the early post-operative period. You can see there is some significant scarring and air bubble in the anterior chamber. After 6 months, it kept on getting better. And this is a post of 1 year. This patient had Down syndrome. So in this case, probably he wouldn't be able to take care of himself. So I did not want to do a regular PKP because that is associated with a very high risk of immune rejection. So best corrected visual acuity was 6/12. Obviously, he could not use RGPs. Otherwise, vision could have improved a little further too. But in the end, it was like a satisfactory visual outcome. And so DALK has numerous advantages because we preserve the endothelium. So there are always good cell counts, and these are basically the person's own endothelium. So there is minimum risk of rejection. The eye is relatively more secure. There is faster healing because there is no risk of endothelial rejection. So you do not need a lot of steroids. So there is less risk of cataract or glaucoma formation. Poor quality donor material can be used in which endothelium cell count is less. And since it is almost an extraocular procedure because we do not do anything inside the anterior chamber other than injecting air. So there is no risk of expulsive choroidal hemorrhage or vitreous prolapse and so on. And also in this case, there is an option to do PKP later, even if the DALK fails. But there are some concerns because it is time consuming, technically more demanding, and a difficult learning curve. You need to go through a structured fellowship program to learn these techniques. And also there are some authors have expressed concern regarding loss of contrast sensitivity and poor vision because of the scarring at the interface. However, there are studies which show that if your dissection is very meticulous and you go very close to Descemet's membrane and residual stroma is less than 80 microns, the visual outcome is as good as PKP. Just to give you an example how DALK makes a difference as compared to PKP. So this is one of my patients who had a 64-year-old man who had a DALK 2 months back, had a fall in the bathroom, hit his left eye and presented with decreased vision 2 days after the fall. On external examination, he had periorbital ecchymosis and swelling, and this is how he looked like. There is no graft. It's just residual stroma, and you can see the suture fragments. The graft is lost. This is the fluorescein stain, and on OCT you have some swelling of the residual. And then in this case, what we prepared a new graft, sutured it, and he was visually rehabilitated. He had best corrected vision of 6/12. So this is the post-operative OCT, and this was published in Cornea. Now, this is another spectrum of pathologies where endothelium, only the endothelial region or the posterior stroma is involved, and the anterior stromal layers are spared. So in such a scenario, it does not make sense to remove whole of the cornea. So examples are, corneal decompensation as a result of Fuchs endothelial dystrophy or pseudophakic bullous keratopathy. So here it would make a lot of sense that you remove only the posterior layers, the Descemet's membrane and endothelium through a small incision in the periphery, and then you take a good quality corneal tissue, and with the specialized techniques of dissection, either manually or with a microkeratome, a thin graft is fashioned from involving the posterior stroma and Descemet's membrane, and this graft can be folded and it can be implanted through a small incision in the periphery, into the anterior chamber. So you do not have to do a full thickness, traffination or full thickness incision into the cornea. Through a small incision in the periphery, this graft is inserted inside the anterior chamber, and inside the anterior chamber with the fluid and air, this graft is unfolded, and then you inject air bubble, large air bubble underneath this graft, and in an attempt to push this graft against the host endothelium. And this graft is held in place with the air bubble only, and no sutures are required. And eventually this graft becomes adhered. Once the endothelial cell pump function is resumed, it adheres to the host cornea and you don't need suture. So this is an example, one of my patients, 62-year-old female with BBK, and she had a cataract surgery about 5 years back and had been losing vision for last 3 months or so. So you can see this is a edematous cornea, and so initially you mark the cornea with a trifine, and then we use with a marking pen. You may make these marks on the cornea, because inside these marking marks you will be doing the Descemet stripping. Then on the temporal side, you make a corneoscleral tunnel, just like we do for SICS cases. And initially a scleral incision is made, and then a tunnel is made, as I said, just like manual small incision cataract surgery. Then through the side port incision, you inject air into the anterior chamber, and with the reverse Sinskey hook, the Descemet membrane is stripped all around. And some people do it under irrigation, some people do it under viscoelastic, but air bubble gives a kind of contrast, and that's how I like to do it. So you go initially from one side and then on the another side all the way 360 degree, and strip the Descemet membrane all around. And then here I'm putting in an anterior chamber maintainer, we do not use viscoelastic in endothelial keratoplasty because it interferes with the adherence of the graft later on. Then you enter the anterior chamber from the tunnel, and here I'll be using a instrument known as stripper, and the Descemet membrane is stripped, and it is an attempt is made to remove it in like one piece. And this is an optional step. Some surgeons do it, some don't. I'm trying to score the periphery of the stroma, because in an attempt to make it a little rough, because some people believe that there is better adherence of the graft once you have a little bit of rough stroma, but we do not do it centrally. Centrally, you do not touch the center of the cornea. Then a pre-cut tissue is used here. It's supplied by eBay, Eye Bank Association of India. And then the donor graft, it is folded in a taco formation, like a 60-40 fold. And then these special forceps, which are atraumatic forceps, you hold it, and it is inserted into the anterior chamber. Some people use other devices like a Busen glide or sutures or needle and so on. So whatever works for different surgeon is done. Then with the help of cannula and combination of air, fluid and so on, you unfold the graft in the anterior chamber, and you have to be very gentle and try not to damage the endothelium. At the same time, the AC maintainer has to be turned off, otherwise the graft will be pushed or expelled out of the eye. Then this the graft has unfolded, you inject air bubble, and now this is the post of day 1. You can see the air bubble in the anterior chamber and well adherent graft, and these cases they clear up nicely, and this patient had a best corrected visual acuity of 6/9. So DSAC offers a lot of advantages as compared to full thickness PKP. You have a stronger eye, because here you do not did not do induce a full thickness crater in the interior in the cornea. because we use like a small 5 mm scleral tunnel in the periphery. Since we do not use any sutures there, so there are no suture-related complications of vascularization, epitheliopathy, or microbial keratitis. Minimal disturbances of the ocular surface because you really do not disturb it unless sometimes you have to, peel off the epithelium to improve the view. But other than that, you do not need to disturb the ocular surface. There is rapid healing or visual rehabilitation as compared to PKP, where it takes a very long time. Nearly astigmatic neutral transplant. Also, there is enhanced resistance to trauma and less risk of expulsive choroidal hemorrhage because it's not an open sky procedure just like PKP. But there are some disadvantages also because despite favorable visual outcome, fewer than expected patients achieve best corrected vision of 6/6. So there are some limiting factors like subepithelial scarring, interface changes, increase in corneal thickness. Also, there are some changes.
Yeah.
So other disadvantages include a significant learning curve, as I told you, and most of the time one has to go through a structured fellowship program to run these lamellar keratoplasty procedures. And also because you tend to fold the graft, and a lot of procedures are done in the anterior chamber with air, fluid, and so on, while trying to make it adhere to the endothelial surface. So inadvertently you cause more endothelial loss as compared to PKP. Also, there are newer set of complications which came with DSAC, like postoperative donor dislocation, epithelial downgrowth into the interface, and sometimes these patients may have a attack of angle closure glaucoma or Urey-Zevalier syndrome and so on. Then this is the new kid on the block, DMAC, Descemet membrane endothelial keratoplasty, first described by Dr. Gerrit Mellis from Netherlands. And here, the idea is just to transplant only the Descemet's membrane and the endothelium, and so here it does not incorporate much of the stromal tissue. So it is associated with the rapid visual recovery and nearly refractive neutral transplant. And the Descemet's membrane graft is prepared, and through an injector it is just like you inject an IOL. This graft is inserted into the anterior chamber, and then various maneuvers you unfold it and make it stick to the endothelial surface. So there are a lot of advantages because it offers faster and more complete visual rehabilitation. A higher percentage of the patients get a best corrected vision of 6/6. There are lower rejection rate because antigen load is less. There is no stroma. It's just the Descemet membrane and endothelium. Minimum refractive change because through a small incision you can insert a larger graft. So a greater number of endothelial cells can be transplanted, and also you can do split the cornea into two. You can do an endothelial keratoplasty, and you can also do a DALK from the anterior stromal tissue. So, but there are some significant disadvantages because the graft attachment is very challenging, and it does not really have, it's very flexible. It does not have the rigidity, and it's very cumbersome to first orient it and then to unfold and then make it stick to the endothelial surface. And graft detachment rate is very high in Indian scenario where tissue comes at a premium. There is a high risk of tissue damage and high rate of tissue wastage, and high rate of graft failure also, and the endothelial cell loss is quite significant as compared to the other technique. So as compared to the Western countries where they have more of Fuchs dystrophy, and after cataract surgery they like in PVK also they present quite early. In India it's very difficult because the patients hair present quite late and the view is very poor. You need to have almost like a clear cornea to do a DMAC, and once the view is compromised it's very difficult. Then the other advancement has been in the field of femtosecond laser. So as we all know, femtosecond laser is very popular nowadays for LASIK, SMILE, and so on. This has been also used by corneal surgeons to do like a customized incisions. So with femtosecond laser, you can this laser allows you to make complex wound designs, and there is a better matching of donor and recipients. There are various ways people have tried to do it: top hat shaped, mushroom shaped, zigzag incisions. So there is more wound surface area and better integrity of the wound. Laser induced keratocyte activation is associated with faster wound healing, and there is better visual recovery, and early suture removal can be done after PKP. So this is a mushroom shaped incision. So if the pathology is limited to the anterior stromal layers, and this is a top hat where you want to transplant more endothelial cells, then you can have a graft which is bigger in the posterior part or posterior layers as compared to the anterior layers. And this is like a zigzag, and this is the OCT appearance. So there is a better fit. It's like a ball and socket type, and the wound is more sturdy. And what is the future view of in the field of corneal transplant? So this one should know that Dr. Shigeru Kaneshuta from Japan, he has recently come out with a molecule which is known as Rho kinase inhibitor. We all know that endothelial cells do not divide because their division is inhibited by a molecule known as Rho kinase. So he has come out with a molecule which is inhibitor of that inhibitor. So once with this molecule, he has been able to demonstrate that endothelial cells can be they can proliferate and divide. So they advocate that for early endothelial dysfunction, like in early Fuchs dystrophy or minimal endothelial edema, early edema, in future we might have this molecule coming in as eye drops. For advanced functions, they would be able to culture it and like in a cell suspension and inject into the anterior chamber to kind of repopulate the compromised endothelial cells. And this is their technique which they have demonstrated. So initially they take a biopsy from the donor corneal endothelium, and these endothelial cells with this Rho kinase inhibitor, they are cultured, and then a suspension is made. And this cell suspension, it's like a liquid. From the patients, you remove the Descemet's membrane, just like I showed you, DSEC, and then instead of inserting a graft, this cell suspension, this injection, like a VEGF, this injection is injected into the anterior chamber, and the patient is made to lie face down for 3 hours. And they have shown this. They reported this series in New England Journal of Medicine. They reported like 11 patients who all of them recovered. 11 patients of corneal edema, PVK, with this injection of Rho kinase. And this is one of the pictures of their patients for corneal decompensation with cell injection. There was resolution of the corneal edema. And recently, this molecule has also been the Ripasudil. It has come to India also, and let's see how it works out. But the corneal surgeons are very excited about it. Other advancement in recent years has been in the field of coming out with substitutes of the cornea, like biosynthetic. You would have heard about 3D cornea printing and stuff. So basically what they are trying to do is they will make like a scaffold or a skeleton of collagen tissue, and then you have these live cells they're trying to incorporate into this scaffold. And if this, but they are having problem in terms of the endothelial cells and how to populate at the posterior surface. But if something like this comes out, then the problem of chronic shortage of corneal donor tissue would be sorted out, and there would be no risk of disease transmission like in these days of where the corona threat of the corneal transplants have come to a standstill because of the risk of transmission. So if in such a scenario we have like a substitute, at least for a like a temporary substitute for few weeks, it would be globe saving in so many cases. And also there would be no issue for with the organ transplant laws. Now, over the recent years, there has been something which has been becoming quite popular, like component corneal surgery, which is basically the same thing as lamellar keratoplasty. So what it means is customized corneal component corneal transplantation, selective excision of the diseased cornea and replaced by layer of the healthy corneal tissue. This term was first given by Shimura, published in Cornea in 2004, and we know that different components of cornea can be transplanted in isolation: epithelium, epithelial stem cells, Bowman's layer, stroma, and endothelium. So just to give you an example, one of our patients. So this patient was a 40-year-old male, diminution of vision for last 6 months, had undergone a PKP 1 year back, had good vision initially, but there was gradual deterioration, and that's how he presented. So it's a failed graft. The cornea has decompensated, and you can see it's very edematous cornea. This is the Scheimpflug image. And so here we used the pre-cut tissue and did the DSEC. So the posterior lamella of a pre-cut tissue was used to do a DSEC. This is a 1-day post-op. Gradually the graft edema resolved, and you can see the detergescence. And this is the pre-op picture, and this is the post-operative picture. The visual best corrected vision improved up to 6/12. But remember, he already had a previous PKP done in that eye, so there was some degree of astigmatism. And this is the Scheimpflug images, which helps you to compare, detergescence, edematous cornea here, and this is a compact or resolved edema. So at the same time, I was managing another patient who was a 45-year-old male who was referred with complaints of diminution of vision and severe pain in his right eye for 2 months. Had been diagnosed with corneal ulcer and had been to multiple ophthalmologists. No relevant systemic history, and lab work was negative. So this was his picture at presentation. So he had like a crescent shaped ulcer, which we call TUK. It was perforated, and this is the iris prolapse. So another picture. So for this patient, we used the rim of the same cornea, which we had used, done the DSEC of the same, from that cornea. We used the rim, and it was trimmed, and appropriate size graft was fashioned, and it was sutured to the host bed after conjunctival resection and freshening of the margin. So this is the 1-day post-op. This is 7-day post-op. This is we call it banana graft. And this is pre-op and post-op. He improved up to 6/18. And at the same time, we were managing another patient who was a 50-year-old female who was referred for a non-healing corneal ulcer, and it was diagnosed as a fungal keratitis and treated with aggressive topical and systemic antifungals. Infiltrate resolved, but there was marked thinning of the corneal stroma. So this is the ulcer initial presentation. With treatment, she responded, but you have this, these radiating folds here and marked thinning of the stroma. When you have these folds, it points towards the impending perforation. So meaning thereby you have to do something to preserve the eye. So this is the on Scheimpflug images. You can see marked thinning here. It can perforate. So considering the risk of eventual perforation, she underwent a patch graft, and for this we used the anterior lamella of the same cornea. So these are the intraoperative picture. We have this anterior lamella here. So appropriate sized patch graft was fashioned, and it was sutured to the host bed. She had a lot of inflammation in the early post-operative period, but gradually she improved, and the eye was salvaged. So this is the post-operative appearance after 3 months, and she developed cataract, and maybe in near for future I'll do a cataract surgery. So you can see here, we were able to use 3 components of 1 cornea in 3 patients. In a different time, I would have required 3 corneas to deal with these 3 patients. So this component corneal transplantation allows us to use our resources judiciously, which makes a lot of difference in countries like ours, where the resources are always limited. And this was not like a one-time procedure. We try to maximize the use. So this is another case. There was a ciliary staphyloma after a patient probably had some complicated cataract surgery elsewhere. So we used the rim of one of the surgery, which PKP, one of the after the donor cornea was used, the rim was left. We used a part of the rim and did like a tectonic graft here, and you can see that there was resolution in his staphyloma. Another patient with PUK with perforation in our part is the patient had hepatitis C, and hepatitis C, these patients sometimes presented with PUK. So initially I tried to glue it with cyanoacrylate glue, but PUKs do not respond well. So the glue doesn't stay quite often. Ultimately, I had to do like a patch graft with the rim of the sclera left behind APK case. And eventually the graft was taken up, and the patient ultimately was referred to the referring surgeon. And the center, other part of the cornea was used for a PBK. So this has a lot of relevance in Indian scenario, where currently we have over 15 million blind people, and 6.8 suffer from corneal blindness with vision of less than 660 at least in one eye. Of these, 1 million people have bilateral corneal blindness. So of the 6.8 million, 3 million people can benefit from corneal transplantation. So in eye banking in Indian scenario, there is a wide disparity in demand and supply, and there is a marked shortage of good quality corneal tissue. Over the recent few years, there are a lot of improvements in terms of eye donation, but still we need good quality tissues, and a lot of these corneas which are eye donation, they are not fit for transplants. So there is still a marked shortage of good quality corneal tissue. And based on availability of safe donor eyes and utilization rate, it is estimated that 2.7 lakh donor eyes are needed to perform 1 lakh corneal transplant per year in India, which is 4-fold increase from the present availability of the donor eyes. So there is a huge gap between demand and supply, and in order to address this gap, customized corneal component transplantation appears an exciting proposition, as it has a potential to reduce the demand by 2 to 3-fold. So it ensures optimum utilization or maximizing the use. The anterior lamellar button can be used for anterior pathologies. The posterior button can be used for endothelial keratoplasty, and the periphery of the rim of the donor tissue can be salvaged and used for small patch graft like I showed, for banana graft like for PUK and Murren's ulcer, limbal stem cell transplantation, and as a covering for glaucoma tube shunts by our glaucoma colleagues. So some steps can help in improving the utilization. So there should be a policy of multiple use of single donor corneal tissue. We still do not have a policy for that. And there is a need for a database of suitable patients in locally at the city level or district level, because quite often one cornea surgeon has the cornea, but he does not have multiple patients. And the other ophthalmologist would have those patients, but they do not have access to the cornea. So there is a lot of need for communication and sharing of resources in such cases, so that tissue is optimally utilized and there is no wastage, because it is almost criminal to waste whatever little resources we have. And also there is a immense need for awareness among the eye care professionals regarding early referral of patients which require keratoplasty, especially in cases of DSAC and corneal ulcers. So my message would be that it is early referral is the key, and it's a well-known fact that with time there is stromal scarring after bullous keratopathy, making it unsuitable for endothelial keratoplasty or DSAC. So if somebody who has a patient of PBK and it's not improving, for 2 months or 3 months, then it's not going to improve. That patient probably can benefit from a endothelial keratoplasty, and there's no point in holding that patient forever. And also a corneal ulcer which is worsening or not responding to treatment, or which is showing signs of impending perforation or desmetocele, it must be referred to a facility for PKP without delay, because once it perforates or there is impending perforation, it's not a medical case, it's a surgical case, and it has to be dealt surgically if you want to salvage the eye. So to conclude, rapid progress is being made in the field of lamellar keratoplasty techniques, and there is a trend towards more selective replacement of diseased corneal layers. and this may continue to decrease the indications for full thickness PKP in future. And this offers tremendous potential in our collective fight against corneal blindness. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll take any questions.